Good morning. Glad to see each one of you this morning. I think maybe the rain has kept some of us away, but you're all here. I appreciate that, braving the weather. And again, you guys are just some good-looking folks this morning. My name is Vince Burgess, and I'm your host and moderator today. I'm glad you're here. And we have an amazing group of educational partners over here to your right. And please check them out and say hello to them. They're really wonderful people. So, but I'm going to go ahead and ask our water sponsor and our pen sponsor to come on up and just kind of tell us a little bit about what they do. But if you need a pen or some water, raise your hand. We're going to get that to you. And also make sure that you have a packet. We'll talk about that in just a second. So if this is your first time, welcome. The bathrooms will be out these doors to your left. Again, you have a packet that has some information in it. And what else am I supposed to say? I'll come back to that, though. You ladies, why are you so far? Come over here into the spotlight. Join me in the spotlight. Come on up. Yeah, I'm not moving. You're going to need to come over here. Here. So I'll ask Susie to tell us a little bit about what Care Patrol does.
Okay, I'm Susie. I'm with Care Patrol, and what we do is we help the senior community find independent living, assisted living, memory care, home care, any services, any resources that you guys need. And we also check the care and violation histories of all of the communities that we partner with. And then we also set up the tours for you guys. So we actually go on tour with you because sometimes there might be some questions that you may forget to ask, or we really do ask those tough questions for those communities. So if you know of anybody or yourself needs to downsize or just needs a higher level of care, we're more than happy to help.
Good morning. I'm so glad that you guys came out with the weather, so we are very appreciative you're here. My name's Lori Anderson. I have been in Georgetown 33 years. I'm a lender. I was a bank lender before, but I'm a mortgage lender now. I know that you guys, a lot of people don't think, oh, I don't need anything about your mortgage lending or anything like that, but I'm here because I'm very passionate about helping seniors. So if you have any questions about the equity in your house, the value of your house, the cash that you have in the house, this is an asset that you guys do have, and you want to make sure that you don't outlive your money. So if you have any questions relating to that, your property taxes, your homeowners, anything that, I'm here as a resource for you. And if I don't have the answer, then of course we've got wonderful partners here to pull over any additional information that I can't help you with.
Thank you, ladies. That wasn't too bad, was it? Give them a hand. Give them a hand. You know, I say this, I'll keep saying it over and over again. We believe in not only seniors living smarter, but seniors planning smarter. So get to know these amazing partners. They're not pushy people that answer your questions, but these are some services that as we age, it's good to have some connections and some resources. So check them out. And also, I want to give a shout out. We have 2 new educational partners. We do shake things up once in a while. So we've got Jen Moss from Provident Crossings. Wave us to us, Jen. We do have some new representatives for Heart to Heart. So we've got Elizabeth and Leanna there. And then Blake in the corner. Good-looking guy, Blake, First Texas Bank. He's a new educational partner. And we've got Leanne and Oscar. We've got Jessica. We've got Erica. We've got Sarah Elizabeth and Scott. And I'm missing somebody. Where'd she go? Okay, so make sure you check those out. You guys can go ahead and take a seat. We've got some seats for you back over here. I'm excited about today, and I'm at an age where I'm kind of the sandwich generation, so I'm helping my parents with some stuff, but I also have kids in their 20s that my daughter's here. Maybe she won't hear me. That think they know everything. So, you know, I'm kind of I'm in that middle spot, and I think I know everything from my parents, right? So it's going to be an interesting conversation today. But before we get started, you don't have to get up, but just turn around to your left, right, and around if you can stretch, and just say hi to those sitting around you, and welcome. Just 30 seconds. Just say hello to people around you. And again, our seminars are free, and the cost of admission is just inviting somebody, right? How about that? I made up that this morning. There's a few invitation cards on the table here. Just take one of these and give it to somebody. I think we provide excellent resources for our seniors, and we want to get the word out. So just take one of those on your way out today. How many of you have walked away from a conversation with one of your children or multiple children and thought, that didn't go the way that I thought it would? Yeah, it happens all the time, doesn't it? How about, did you ever feel like your kids were kind of telling you what to do? No? Yeah? Got some head raises. Do you ever think they could have probably worded that a little bit differently? Oh, yeah. We got an emphatic, oh, yeah. So we're gonna have so much fun with this. And most of you know, so my current gig is host and moderator here, but I'm also a broker associate and real estate agent and help seniors in downsizing. But my previous life, I told my dad joke is I'm a recovering therapist. I used to be a therapist years ago, marriage and family therapist, worked with kids and families, and then before I retired, I was an administrator over a countywide behavioral health system, children, adult, substance abuse, and mental health. And so I have some experience in this, but I put away that, in my former life. But I do pull from that toolbox quite often when you work with folks, especially in real estate, and it can be a very up and down emotional thing. So, but there's a Bob Newhart skit, and I'm sure you've seen this. He's a therapist, and his advice to the lady is just stop it. So look that up. Bob Newhart, just stop it. You'll giggle all day long with that. So we're not going to say that today. We're not going to tell you just to stop it. But we've got an amazing panelist with us today, Nadia. And I'll just ask you to introduce yourself and what you do, and we'll kick this thing off.
Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Nadia Velasquez, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And I have a lot of roles, and that's probably because I work for a nonprofit, and they normally tell you to do 10 jobs under the title of one. But one of my biggest roles, and one of the roles that I love the most, is providing psychotherapy services to adults 55 and older. So kind of that 55 and older, typically our clients are on Medicare. And what I often do is I either meet them in the comfort of their home, because a lot of people don't feel comfortable driving in the community. Maybe they don't have transportation, or it isn't safe for them to drive. And so we meet them in the comfort of their home, and we provide mental health services there. And yeah, I've been doing that for now almost 7 years. And it's through an organization called Family Eldercare. And it serves Travis County, Williamson County, and some of the surrounding counties, depending on our availability. But Family Eldercare is also a nonprofit that has a myriad of services, all geared towards working with older adults, and also making sure that older adults are aging with dignity and in place and with the supports that they need.
Excellent. Thank you, Nadia. So let me get some participation from you this morning. So when you think about conversations with family, your kids, what are those areas that maybe you disagree on, or there's some tension on? Maybe just you can shout it out. What's an area or two that you're like, oh, okay, that we kind of butt heads on this, or we don't see eye to eye? Driving. Respect. What else? Politics. What was this? Apathy. Finances. What else? realizing that you're not the daughter, you're the mother. And she's trying to become the mother, so she's trying to kind of switch roles. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love what you just said. You appreciate that she cares, but it's still your life. And that's kind of a key thing we want to kind of weave in today is a sense of independence and your position as the parent. And how do you maintain that and then realize there are ways and means that you might need help in certain areas or assistance in certain areas, but how do you maintain that independence and dignity around that? So I really appreciate that. You did my job for me. You want to come up here? I'm going to get a chair up here for you. So other things, again, I had on my list, driving, we said, health and medical decision, finances, living independently, downsizing or moving, mom, this is too big for you, or just accepting help, caregiving responsibilities, sibling disagreements, feeling treated like a child, and adult, and this is interesting, adult children feeling responsible for your safety. And I think that's a very interesting point. So I'm going to punt this over to Nadia. From your experience, sort of what are some of the most common communication challenges that you're seeing between seniors and adult children?
Yeah, I think this lady hit the nail on the head. I think at the root of it, it's this role reversal. And as we age, there is this perception that, our children have to take care of us. And in order for our children to take care of us, that means that they have to tell us what to do, just like you told them what to do when they were a child. And I think that's probably one of the misperceptions about aging as well. Because at the root of role reversal, it's really a power dynamic, right? It's about older adults losing power and the children gaining power. And whenever power dynamics are involved, we tend to get a little bit sensitive about that, right? We want to protect what we have, what independence we have, and it feels like things are getting taken away from us. I think, other ideas related to common communication challenges also kind of deal with this idea of grief and loss. And as a therapist, I view all of the work that I do through a lens of grief and loss. And we experience changes throughout our life. But at the very beginning and at the very end, we experience a lot of change. And so when I think about that change, especially for older adults, it's this feeling of loss of independence, loss of health, loss of, being able to do things on my own. And that is a really, really hard thing for many people to deal with. At the same time, children are also experiencing that same loss, right? My parent is no longer able to kind of play that parent role that they once used to. My parent may not be able to save me like they used to. And so I think both of those experiences are being had by both parties, but they're very different types of losses.
Yeah, that's really good. I want to do a sound check. Is everybody hearing myself and Nadia okay? At any time, just give me the thumbs up and I'll give you the thumbs up back, but just maybe do that, and then I'll know. I want to make sure you can hear us. So let's kind of go down that path a little bit. When we have conversation with our children, and what are some of the emotions involved, right? Because adult children have one emotion, parents have another, or maybe they're the same. Like what's the emotional aspect of that?
Yeah, I think what I hear most especially when I first start working with individuals, they say they feel fear, they're scared. And I think when we dig a little deeper and we go into that fear, it manifests as anxiety, right? Like, I need to take care of this, I need to worry about the future, I need to figure out what I'm going to do with all of this stuff that I've been collecting for 30, 40 years in this house. And there is this overwhelming anxiety. I think another type of emotion that's coming up is this feeling of vulnerability, right? I work with a lot of individuals who feel particularly vulnerable and not able to protect themselves or keep themselves safe in the way that they once used to. And instead of sharing that vulnerability with people around us, we like to keep it in because there's this fear that if I tell somebody I can't do X, Y, Z, then they're going to take that away from me, right? If I tell my children that, backing out of car spaces is a little bit difficult, or I have trouble driving in the Walmart parking lot, I may come home and the keys might maybe disappeared. And so I think that there's this component of vulnerability as well. And then, again, I'm always going to bring this back to grief and loss. I think grief and loss is a really difficult emotion that we are horrible at with. I don't know a lot of people who grieve gracefully, and it's a hard experience. And instead of grieving and working through these more challenging experiences, we avoid them or we kind of push them aside until another day.
I love that phrase you just said, grieving gracefully. You should write a book on that, or maybe there is a book on that. That's hard. That's hard. Now, what do you feel like are some common misconceptions that adult, seniors have of their adult children and adult children have of their parents?
Well, there's lots of stereotypes about the baby boomer population, right? Yeah. Y'all have heard them? What have y'all heard about baby boomers? Have you heard anything about baby boomers? I've heard a lot as well. I think a lot of times children think that, my parents are stuck in their ways, that they won't listen to me, they're stubborn, they're technology inept, they can't work their phone or they can't work their television. But I also think older adults have perceptions about their children, like I can't talk to them about anything because they're too sensitive. I honestly feel like I hear the sensitivity. Like if I bring anything up, they get defensive with me. I can't tell them anything. And so I think that there are conflicting misperceptions about each generation.
Yeah. Let me go back to the technology thing. We had the technology seminar last month. But I will say, at no point in history are we seeing the technological advances as we've seen in your lifetime. And then in the decades to come, the rate of change is just unbelievable. So I remember my mom and I were talking recently, and she grew up in rural North Carolina, didn't have running water in the house. I sat around the radio forever, remembers the first TV they got. And so now, look where we are at technology today. It's pretty unbelievable. It's pretty fascinating we just touched on AI last month and all that's going on with that. But it's quite fascinating. So don't feel bad if you can't, that new fandangled phone or TV. It's probably, it's just too crazy sometimes, So, but I want to go back to the idea of independence and maintaining independence and control. And why is that so important as we age? Because that seems to be sort of a key linchpin on a lot of emotion. But talk to us about that, like maintaining independence and control. Like, why is that such a charge with our adult children?
I think that you can't really kind of bring up independence with thinking about our culture as a whole. And we live in a society and a culture that values independence. And it's this whole, pick you up by your own bootstraps, that common saying that, I'm going to be the person that takes care of myself. I'm going to get things done. If I want something done, I am going to be the agent of change. But the reality is that you cannot age by yourself. You have to have community. And there's all different types of ways to have community. All of this right here, that is a source of community in a sense. You may be paying for it, or it may be, offered by a third party and it's more formalized, but that is a sense of community. Your children If you have children, if you have siblings, that is another form of community. Your friends, that is another source of community. And I think that there's this, misperception that if I have to depend on other people, I'm weak or I'm a failure or whatever the word is for you. But the reality is that to age successfully, you will have to rely on supports of others. And you will have to understand how relationships are mutually beneficial for you and for the other person involved.
That's really good. I want to go back to something you said too about the stereotype of the younger generation is sometimes overly sensitive, and I know I've had this conversation with my adult girls, and the generation under me. It's interesting because, and so these would be maybe your grandkids in the 20s and 30s or wherever, is we went from mental health being sort of so taboo with a generation or two, and then my kids have said sometimes our generation is like, that's the label. Oh, I'm anxious, I'm depressed. And it's sort of swung the opposite way where that's your identity. So it's a very interesting balance, I think. And have you seen that in dealing with seniors? Like the difficulty in acknowledging maybe depression or anxiety, and then maybe the younger generation saying they're much more willing to talk about it.
One reason I love my job is because, I get to observe how change and growth can happen at any age. You can train an old dog to do new tricks, believe it or not. It's a lot harder to train an older dog, but it can happen. And I think that's where I have a lot of hope in this area, is, this idea that change can happen at any age. And when I work with older adults at Family Eldercare, I usually get two groups of people. I get groups of people who are lifelong believers and committed to therapy. They have been in therapy on and off throughout their life and see a value in talking to another person objectively. And then there's another pool who are what we call new to therapy folks. They've never been in therapy, they don't know how it works, they're skeptical about it, and they're not sure it's the right thing for them. And these people come in very curious and open, because they are recognizing that something's going on in their life and they don't like it. And they're noticing these tendencies to do these things in a way that is no longer helpful in serving them. And they're noticing that maybe I need to talk to somebody else to see if there's anything I can change about what I'm experiencing. And so I think there are two subsets. A lot of people that I've also worked with, they assume that I'm younger, and when I first started, I was a lot younger. I was fresh out of college, but they admired the younger population and their ability to talk about very hard things that weren't talked about. There was a Me Too movement that happened several years ago, and that is where a whole bunch of women came out and started talking about sexual abuse that they had experienced. Before that time, we did not talk about that at all. That was something we never brought up. And then maybe like a year after that, I got a client who came up to me, and she's like, I want to talk about this thing that happened to me when I was a teenager, and it's always stayed with me. And so I think that there is value in that, right? I think the younger generation is teaching us that it's okay to talk about these things that I was always told not to talk about. And so I think that there is an evolving and a changing in seeking out help, and also talking about things that, I haven't gotten over with after 50 years. So maybe I need to do something about that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So when we talk about there's this idea sometimes in communication, there's two different kind of levels. There's process and content, right? There's sort of the content of what you're saying, but oftentimes underneath of that, there's something more meaningful, right? If Mom, I don't think you should drive, the heart behind that isn't typically like, I'm going to ruin your life and make you dependent on people. It's like, I'm concerned or I care. But sometimes it's the delivery that I think, and we'll talk later in this seminar about maybe some communication ways and styles that we could look at. But when you think about the colliding sort of perspective, I think there's probably more commonality than we realize in an adult child's perspective and then your perspective towards them. So finish this, you can say it out loud or in your mind. I think adult children worry most about what? I think adult children worry most about what? And if you want to shout something out, you can say, what do you think adult children worry most about for you? Yeah. Did you say they don't care? Okay. So, yes, ma'am. They worry about the death of a parent. Okay. It's true. What else? Yes, Bonnie.
In my situation, a huge responsibility, financial responsibility. And I know my daughter, she was, if anything happens, I can't pay for that.
So,
They expect you to pay for that, you know.
yeah, so Bonnie was saying she feels like her daughter worries about the financial responsibility, and that if something happened to you, she feels like she wouldn't be able to, but you're saying, I don't want you to. You don't have to be responsible for that, but she still feels that responsibility. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so we're saying that sometimes adult children are like, my plate's full. I've got 3 children, and if something happens to you, that would kind of tip me over the edge. Yeah. So what do you worry most about losing? As you age, what do you worry most about losing? Independence. Being in good health. Yeah. Exercise. Thriving. Driving. And thriving, I guess. Driving, yes. Your mind. Mm-hmm. Loneliness. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a big one. And as I was going through this material today and in conversations Nadia and I had, I was thinking the heart behind adult children, generally, now, you know, some kids may be just frustrating, but generally, most adult children want to come from that place of caring, feeling responsible. I don't want to feel the guilt if something happened to you, if I thought maybe you were having problems driving, but I never said anything, and you got in an accident. Like, those are very real things. And then from your perspective, maybe you're holding back. Oh, I hit, you know, that I went to get gas at Costco or wherever, and that pole that doesn't move, the concrete pole, I hit that, you know, but I don't want to tell because they're going to say, Mom, you know, it's going to be, you know, 20 questions and an inquisition. And so sometimes those are very competing emotions, and sometimes they're very complementary. And I think that's just interesting when we talk about conversation and perspective. Sometimes when we go into a conversation, we're not that far off. It's just maybe the way we say it, the way we, you know, put the heart behind it, maybe not be that far off. Is that, you want to add to that at all?
No, I absolutely do. I believe that as well. And I think that maybe one emotion that was missed was overwhelm. I think both people are overwhelmed because, again, look at these tables. There's over a dozen tables. It's like, I can't believe there's this many resources for older adults, but there are a lot of nuts and bolts to aging and planning for end-of-life things. And it is overwhelming to both the person aging and to the children because you're planning for 50 different scenarios and only one's going to happen. So I think overwhelm is another one. But I do think, you know, the intent is that I want to make sure that you're taken care of. And I want you to be taken care of in a way that gives you dignity and that we're not, throwing you in some old folks' home at the last minute because we don't know what to do.
That's so good, so good. So let's move on to the next section about improving communication. And, we could give some practical advice of, maybe how to say things differently, or if you need to do this, you should do that, why don't you, versus have you thought about, and we could maybe go into some of those, but what are some communication habits that that you see that tend to create tension and disagreement?
Yeah, I want to single out this lady in the front row, and I think what she was talking about is that, she had mentioned something to her children, and her daughter assumed that she had to do a whole bunch of things. And I think that's one of the biggest areas of communication challenges, is making assumptions, right? That when I say this, you're telling me that I have to fix all of these things and plan and do everything, and you may not be telling them that, right? And I think it works the other way as well, that when our children say something, we assume they're going to take our car keys away, or they assume they're going to, take our bank accounts away so they can start managing things. And so I think a big part is making assumptions, and one way to not make assumptions is to ask for clarity, right? Or to go back and say, you know what, I didn't mention this because I wanted you to, find me a new home or find me a new senior community. I actually mentioned this just because I wanted to have a conversation about, what's next. This is something that's been worrying me, or this is something, I would feel more comfortable if we had a plan with. And so I think kind of paying attention to when we're making assumptions in conversations and getting more clarity about them before our thoughts run wild with them.
Yeah, that's good. So what are some practical techniques or methods that, we could share today that would help conversations be a little more productive?
Yeah, I think one of them is to, especially when we're having more emotionally charged conversations, is to come with a goal in mind, right? Let's use driving for an example, right? Maybe you had some difficulties driving or something that you noticed, and you just kind of wanted to bring it up to your children. You know what? Before you bring it up to your children or whoever your support system is, what is the reason why you're bringing up to the children? What are you needing out of them? Are you needing a listening ear? Are you just needing to be heard? Are you needing advice? Are you needing resources to the community for XYZ? Thinking about what we're needing helps guide the conversation, because you can start the conversation, hey, I wanted to tell you about something, this happened, and it made me feel, anxious or worried or concerned, and I'm wondering if you could just lend a listening ear. Or I wonder if you could help me figure out a easier way or safer way about this. So one of them is just being very direct. If I'm going to bring up this difficult conversation related to, a do not resuscitate, what is your goal in having that conversation with your children? Is it to get their input? Is it for you to let them know what your wishes are? And let them know. That way, they don't have to make assumptions about what they should do.
Wow, that was good. Okay, we're done. Write those nuggets down and let's have some coffee. No, that's really good. So I love that. I love the idea of stating, in your mind, and actually stating the goal of why do we want to get out of this conversation, and talk to us about the idea of acknowledging. Kind of explore that a little bit. Like, this conversation may be ... but acknowledging what the conversation may bring up. Is there importance in sort of, and again, this can be this isn't easy stuff sometimes, like naming the potential emotion that could come up. But the value of that is, if you name it, then it kind of takes the power away from it, right? Like, hey, I want to have this conversation about do not resuscitate. I want to share with you what I'm feeling and thinking. you may not agree with this, and it may be frustrating. And I just want to get that out there. But blah blah blah. But what's the value in sort of naming the potential emotion that could come up?
I think a lot of it is validation, right? That you are not going to be the only person who has the worries and concerns that you experience. Your children have them. Believe it or not, it may not seem like it. It may manifest, it may seem like they don't care about anything. They have those worries too. And I think that is kind of a mutual meeting point in those conversations that, I'm thinking about my future and what lies next, and it's worrying me because I don't have a lot of plans in place at this time. They're probably going to say, yeah, I can understand that. I would be worried too if those plans weren't in place, and yeah, maybe let's do something about that. But I think it's very validating to kind of meet at that point where we're both going through that same type of experience, right? That we're both having concerns about this, that we both have anxieties or worries about this.
Yeah, that's good. So, and these are this next question you may want to write down on a piece of paper and give to your adult children. So, what are some ways that adult children could express concern without sounding controlling or taking away your independence? What are some suggestions you would have for adult children?
Yeah, when I think about this, and I think this is true for either side. And so when I talk about the children, you can also kind of reverse it to apply for you. But I think taking ownership of our emotions is the really big one. And I think that when I talk to adult children, they don't think that their parents are taking ownership for their experience. And they may not be communicating that in the best ways. And so, like I mentioned before, you're taking ownership of your own experience. We're not saying, why are you frustrated at me? We're not saying, why are you anxious with me? You're always anxious with me. Instead, we're saying, I notice whenever you come to the house, we're both feeling a little anxious, or we're both feeling a little on edge. What's that about, right? And instead of putting their emotions on them, we're kind of acknowledging our own experience and taking ownership for our own experience in that type of situation. And I think a big part of it is being very mindful with how we communicate. And so we're communicating our feelings without blame and without criticism. It's not like, I feel this way because of you. I'm upset and angry and short with you because you took my car keys away. What do you expect? Instead, we're saying, I'm feeling angry and upset because I don't have my independence anymore. My car keys are no longer here. And so I think that is received very differently.
So how can you maintain healthy boundaries without shutting down communication, right? So sometimes it's like, I want to maintain my independence, but then the other party may, you don't want to talk, or you just shut down the communication. So what are some techniques to sort of help that along?
Yeah, I think this one is hard, and I think one thing that I hear a lot with older adults, especially when they're coming to therapy for the first time, they're coming to therapy because they are ready for change, right? They're acknowledging that, hey, this isn't working for me, I don't like the way I'm feeling, I want to change. But the reality is that your children may not be ready to change. And they may be doing their own work, or they may have different priorities at that time. And so there is kind of this difficulty in that, I'm working toward change, but they're not necessarily aware of that. I think we've brought it up a couple of times, but one of the first things is increasing awareness related to these conversations. And at the low level, it's like, oh, my children have left. That conversation didn't go well at the moment, right? What I'd like to do is, if you're noticing that, try to notice it earlier. When you're having these conversations, it's like a red flag is going off in your head, right? I said this, my daughter was very defensive, red flag. And at that red flag, it's taking a stop. It's stopping you in your tracks. And that's, when I encourage people to take a step back, breathe. Instead of reacting, think about how you would want to respond. Go back to that goal that you set at the initial conversation. Why did I want to have this? And think about how your response can move you towards that goal. Because we can respond with criticism and blame just how perhaps they're responding to us, but that's going to set the same feedback loop, and we're not going to go anywhere with that conversation. We've done it before, it's going to happen again, but that's why that red flag is so important. So visualize a red flag, visualize a stop sign, and literally stop yourself. Take a step back. If you need to go in another room, take a breath, and then come back, do that. But it is incremental. It doesn't always happen the next time you have a conversation with your children, because again, these conversations are triggering, and they often are dysregulating, which means that our heart starts pounding, our face might get flushed, we might start having all kinds of experiences to get out, to be reactive, to avoid this conversation. So it does take time, and it starts with awareness.
And you said so many good things then, right in that section that I wanted to touch on a couple is, some of us in the room may have had a series of difficult conversations, and you probably wouldn't even label it a conversation, maybe a difficult interaction, right? You didn't even get to the conversation part. And then it happened again and again. And then so some of us in the room may be like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I don't think you act like you don't care. You act like, it's just too frustrating, too stressful. And so, this is another segment we'll get to in just a minute of sort of when you get to a place where you feel like, can I resurrect this conversation, or should I? Which I think is very powerful in and of itself, where we get to a place where in our mind we don't think anything's going to change. But I think there's hope for that. A quick exercise, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. So your adult child says, Mom or Dad, I'm not picking on moms, Dad, let's pick on Dad. Dad, you need to stop driving. What would some other ways you could hear that differently? What are some of the words that could be said? What's the heart behind that of Mom or Dad, you need to stop driving? They're worried about you. What else? How could you hear that differently? What are the words? Mom, I'm worried about you. Have you been having any issues driving, or what else? I have some here if you shout them out. But how are you feeling about driving lately? Have there been any situations on the road that have made you feel uncomfortable? What options would help you continue getting where you want to go? Or maybe we could talk about you're driving, you've had a couple accidents. I want you to keep feeling safe and independent. And again, some of us in the room are like, this is way too touchy-feely for me. But I will say, if you don't access part of this, then the communication may never get a little better. I think you said early on that there is an aspect of vulnerability, and sometimes when we have these tough conversations, we just shut ourselves off emotionally. Look at me, I sound like a therapist. So let's go to the difficult conversation piece and a couple questions for you. So in your experience, what are some of those conversations that we need to have, but that we're avoiding pretty consistently?
Yeah, I think they're the obvious ones, like driving. Driving is always a big one. We live in Texas. It is not always easy to use public transportation if it's available. Taking your car, your rights to your car away is incredibly difficult, and it's a hard thing to talk about. I think another obvious one is end-of-life planning and final arrangements. And what I mean by end-of-life planning, it's making decisions about what you want for your body at your end of life, both when you're alive and then once you've died. And so, do I want to be a do not resuscitate? Do I want to be a full code? Do I want to be in the hospital when I die? Do I want them to do everything possible, including feeding tubes, chest compressions, airway tubing, all of that stuff? Do I want that or not? Again, not fun to think about, but if you have strong opinions about it, you need to talk about it, because we live in a world again where they are going to do everything possible to keep you alive unless you say otherwise. And that might work when you're 30 or 40, but if you're a 90-year-old, I don't know if you're going to want chest compressions. And so these conversations are not only important to have right now, but they're also important to revisit every few years, because those could change. I think other ones that people are not having, and I think it's not necessarily because they don't want to have it, but it's also because we don't know, is that aging and dying often are a long road. It is a marathon. It's not typically a sprint. Yes, there are people that die of a heart attack, and it's quick and it's sudden, and they have a stroke, and that's always a possibility. But the general population, it is a long, slow decline. And some people have decline, stable, decline, stable, decline, stable. And this could last years. And so the conversations that I think people are not having is that if I'm going to need care for 10 years, what is that going to look like? Where is it going to look like? Do I have the finances to support that type of thing? And I think those are hard conversations because it's a heavy thing to think about. I have a couple others. Should I keep going?
Go for it.
I think along with that is just people's expectations about caregiving. I think caregiving is such a huge, it's something that is not valued in our culture. And I think there are mostly women in this room, and I'm going to make a big assumption in thinking that most of the women took care of all the caregiving duties most of their life. Who is going to take care of you? And so I think that's a big role because our society does not value caregiving. People do not get paid for caregiving, and we currently live in a world where most women work. And so how is your daughter going to take care of you, work, and be a caregiver? Is that even financially sustainable for her? Can I pay my daughter to be a caregiver? Can I pay someone else to be a caregiver? And so I think the caregiving component is a huge discussion that needs to be had because a caregiver can't just be one person. And, you know, I'm always cautious when families say, oh, I have this caregiver agency. They're going to take care of everything. They will take care of a lot. They cannot take care of everything. And this is where the community component comes in. It takes a village. It's not going to be one agency that's going to be providing 24/7 care continuously. Your children are going to have to step in. Your friends are going to have to step in. Other people that you might pay out of pocket are going to step in. It takes a village. So I think the caregiving component is, again, not necessarily a conversation people are avoiding, but aren't realistic about it.
So, and this is a question that Virginia and I have talked a bit about in the recent few months. What's the right time to begin discussing future plans? There's a right answer here. We haven't discussed this either, but yeah, what's the right time to talk about future plans?
Whenever you can. I mean, I started my career doing hospice social work, and so I have been a little too eager to discuss this. I have medical power of attorney. I have my wishes on my resuscitation status. That is all written, and I've had it written since I was 25 because I don't want to burden my husband with making those difficult decisions. You know, I have a family, and those decisions are made because I want to make sure that they are taken care of, and that's one tiny little thing that they won't have to think about if, you know, the terrible events happen in my life. But I think it changes at every age. And, you know, a big part of me is advocating for my family members, like mom and dad, what do you want? I'm an only child. Like, it's gonna be me who's making these decisions. You're not gonna let anybody else make these decisions. So I do need to have an idea of what you want. And if you're not gonna make an idea of what you want, let me tell you what I would do in your scenario. And if we don't agree on that, then there's a problem, right? That is even more of a reason to have a conversation. I think more often than not, people get a diagnosis, whether it's cancer or perhaps they get, you know, a memory loss, a cognitive diagnosis such as dementia or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. Sometimes those can be helpful indicators like, hey, life is fragile. The future is uncertain. Let's take this as an opportunity to take care of some business.
Yeah, that's good. And our answer would be, what's the right time? Now. It's never too early to start talking about the future and future plans. So for those of us in the room who don't want to talk about and refuse to talk about aging, future needs, what would you say? How would you encourage them today to have that difficult conversation?
Is this like y'all don't want to talk about it, or the children don't want to talk about it?
Those of us in the room don't want to talk about it as a senior.
This one is hard. As a provider, it is very important for me to have consent to talk about difficult things with my clients. But you know what? A lot of times, if I'm getting some resistance from clients, a lot of it is just starting with talking about what your goals are. And also talking about what you do not want. A lot of times that can be more important. There are some people who do not want to be cremated. If you do not want to be cremated, it is very important for you to make sure that that is known. And so there are things like that. There are some people that say, I want to die in my home. I do not want to die in the hospital. If that is something that you really want, then you do need to talk to people about that. And the hard part about it is that it's not simply just talking about it, especially if you have a family with multiple vocal children or multiple vocal family members that are not in agreement. It's getting it written down on paper, having these discussions ahead of time, talking to the people in your life that not only understand you, but are able to carry out really difficult decisions in emotionally charged events in your life. And I say that because sometimes that's not your child. Sometimes it might be a sister, maybe a cousin, maybe it's a third party where there's a little less emotional connection there. Because for some children, it's like, nope, I'm keeping my dad along as long as possible. Like, I'm not going to do that. Well, if you don't have it on writing, your son can do that or your daughter can do that. And so I think, part of it is, talking about what your goals are, talking about what you do not want for your life, and then getting it on paper.
That's good. That's good. So as we kind of close it, we're going to land the plane here with our final section on rebuilding trust. But I want you to think about, what is one conversation that you need to have, should have, that you've been postponing? What is one conversation? And you don't have to say this out loud. Write it down. Think about it. Because we just don't want to be talking heads up here. We do want there to be action and when you take away something. But think about that. What is a conversation? Has this a topic that's kind of been spurred today that you're like, yeah, I should probably have that conversation with my kids? Be thinking about that. I think that's and again, for whatever reasons we talked about today, there's lots of reasons why maybe we don't, but we really want to kind of make some movement forward. So let's talk about rebuilding trust. And I mentioned this earlier, how some of us in the room may be like, do my kids care, or they're stubborn, or we have a history of but I think that there's an idea that every past conflict doesn't necessarily mean that you can't improve the way you communicate today or tomorrow. And have you seen that, where some people feel a little stuck because and again, I always recommend stay away from always, those kind of all-inclusive words. But can trust be rebuilt after years of tension and conflict?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I would be in this field if I didn't think that relationships could be repaired. And that's the way, I think about it, is repairing. And, when I work with people, one of the first things that I talk with them about is, what does repair look like in your life? If you've been married and you've gotten in conflicts with your spouse, what did that repair look like? Did it look like you being able to sit down and have a calm conversation? Did it look like y'all going to separate rooms and slamming the door for a couple of hours? What did that repair look like? Because that's often similar to what repair looks like with your children. And when I say repair, there are adaptive ways to repair that are healthy and, helpful, and there are maladaptive ways to repair, right, that are more destructive and create and breed disconnection. And so one of the first things I'm always looking about is how have you approached repairing conflict with anybody in your life in the past? And then I go on from there, like how do we want it to look like in the future? And it's not going to be drastic, especially with our children. It is going to be slow incremental changes, making small adjustments to how we have conversations. And I think that's the importance and value in taking ownership of our emotions in these types of conversations. Saying, I didn't like how that conversation went. I said some things that I shouldn't have said, or I raised my voice at you in a way that wasn't appropriate. I should have had a calmer tone with you. Start with the ownership that you can take for yourself, and then I think that is setting the stage for, we're having a different conversation right now. We're not blaming each other. We're not criticizing. We're taking ownership for our emotions and seeing how we can kind of continue to have these conversations.
So what role do empathy and validation play in rebuilding trust? And some people think that validation means agreement. And it doesn't you can acknowledge and validate someone's thoughts or feelings, but not agree, with them but so how does that play out, in a conversation with our adult kids?
Yeah, I think validation is incredibly important because in this world, we all just want to be seen and heard. And I think that's where a lot of disconnection comes from, is that you're having these conversations with your children and they are having conversations with you, but they are not feeling heard and seen, and either are you. And this lady over here was wonderful in being able to have empathy, that, she understood that her daughter was, trying to take control over things, but the underlying feeling is that she's concerned for me. And I think that being able to do that switch in your mind when it's happening, like if your children's getting mad at you or upset with you or criticizing you or blaming you, what is that underlying message of what they're feeling? Are they concerned? Are they worried? Are they grieving? Because, my dad can't do the same things that he used to do, and that's really hard for me to witness as a child.
And in that same example, it's interesting because, you could all be dubbed therapists by the time you're done here today. But how powerful will it be if in that conversation we were able to say, I hear you say that, but I think below that, you're just expressing care and concern. But the way you came across felt bossy or whatever, but you're really kind of naming that would be very powerful, I think.
Right, even just saying, you're worried about me. Just saying that,
They'll be stunned.
It just hits differently.
So what gives you hope as like you said, you wouldn't be in this position if you didn't feel like trust could be rebuilt, people could change, and we're not saying we're not labeling you an old dog, but the adage, old dog, you can actually teach old dogs new tricks, is what you said. But what gives you hope in what you do in the communication and family relationships?
Yeah, I think that we're living in a world, and technology is playing a huge part of it. And there's absolutely great things that we're seeing with technology. But what worries me is that it's breeding more disconnection, and it's also disrupting the quality of relationships. We are in a fast-paced world, especially with technology, where you're just swiping and scrolling and swiping, and everybody is impacted by it. Children, older adults, once my parents retired, I just noticed that they were on their phones a lot more than they've ever been in their life. And the reason I bring this up is because it breeds disconnection. Instead of sitting around a table, people are on their phones. And so, although we are communicating very differently now, and the quality of our communication is declining. And I think it has been for a while, but we're having these conversations now. Y'all are here. Maybe y'all didn't know what you were coming for today or what the talk would be about. Maybe you did, I hope. But we're talking about communication, and I think this lady in the back, like, loneliness is a big part of not feeling seen and heard, which is communication. And it's a huge issue. But I think that people, coming to me for therapy and like noticing that the relationships aren't the same and they want to improve them, that's what's giving me hope. And I think a lot of it is also talking about how do we kind of go back to what communication looks like, right? Good communication looks like. And I have like these very fond memories of me being a child, and my grandparents played a big role in my caregiving as a child. And like just sitting in the morning and drinking coffee. I didn't drink coffee, but I had the sweet bread and the desserts, like the donuts. And we would literally just start every morning sitting at the table, and my grandma would be talking with me. Sometimes we wouldn't talk, they'd be reading the newspaper. But that was quality time and communication, right? And we don't do that anymore. And so I think a big part of it is, trying to make spaces and make conversations and welcome people to kind of have conversations in generally, but also to have the difficult conversations. Because sometimes it feels like we're just having difficult conversations. But if we're able to kind of connect at times when there is an urgency or crisis, that is kind of going to make it easier for us to have the more difficult conversations as well.
That's good. So let's land the plane with this final question, and you may have answered it, but give us another answer. If you could leave everyone today with one piece of advice for building stronger relationships between themselves and their adult children, or if you're an adult child here in the room and you're a parent, what would that one piece of advice be?
I think a big part of it is that, we heal in our relationships, and that there's lots of opportunity for growth in relationships. And I think the bigger picture is that we all need connection with one another. And so there's all different ways that we can get connection through other people, but I also think that's on us to be responsible and taking ownership and being able to have hard conversations and easy conversations overall.
Yeah, that's good. And so I also want to say I was having a conversation with the Bradfords earlier, and how this was a timely, seminar for them, and, having conversations with your kids. And I love the idea, too, about stating the goal and then not assuming in conversation. So can someone get out your action steps for today? That should be in your packet. You got that sheet real fast? Can I borrow somebody's? I don't have mine. Anyone? I know Betty Jean. Yes, that one right there. Perfect. So on this action steps, there was place for notes, but at the bottom, and we covered all these, but choose the right time to talk. Important conversations are often more successful when everyone is calm and free from distraction. Set aside time when you can both give the conversation your full attention. Start small. Focus on one topic. Sometimes we say, okay, we're going to meet for 3 hours and talk about everything. It's probably not a good idea. Start small. Be clear about your goals. And Nadia, you had said that in our talk here. Keep the conversation going. Building trust takes time. Follow up after important conversations and continue checking in with one another. Keep going back over and over again. Sometimes we don't have the fruitful conversation the first time, but it's worth it. It's worth to keep trying. So those are just some action steps. We want this to be practical for you. So let's have a Q&A time. Could I get one of my charming, mostly beautiful, and one handsome guy, or two handsome guys, one of you to grab this mic up here and be a runner for me, and Betty Jean.
You have spent most of this time discussing your children personally. We have the situation where our one son is many, many, many miles away, and we don't see them very often. How do we deal with that?
Yeah, I think that's hard, and I think that's, I think one of the big discussions to have is if you're okay with that. Have you had discussions about whether you want to move closer to him or whether he should move closer to you, and if there's any movement on that? That would be my first question for y'all. Have y'all?
We have daughter-in-law problems.
Okay, so it's not going to work.
That's next month. Well, we did open up with, well, we've gotten our will, and we discussed, do you want to be the executor? And so we started there. I did imply that we had made arrangements for various and sundry things, and that at some point we would have him come here and show him where things are. I also threw out that when we were ready to leave the house, we were going to look at independent living nearby. So, I mean, I did throw that out as a, without a discussion, let him know that's where we were thinking.
Yeah, no, I think that is a great start. And I think one of the things that y'all are doing is that you're welcoming his inclusion, but you're also not demanding it. And so I think that you are doing the steps that you need to do. And I think that this speaks to a larger thing that is going to be growing is that, one, we assume that our children want to be involved. And some of us may have the privilege that all of our children are fighting over all of our care needs, but more often than not, that's not the case. And then more and more often, there are people who are aging without children. And that is a growing thing. And so, this is where we kind of think about who is my community, who is my village, and honoring the capacity of your son and what he can do several miles away, and who might be able to take on a load that's closer, right? Who might be better fit to do X, Y, Z, and who may be better able to fix caregiving needs versus finances versus end-of-life planning. And so thinking ahead that, it may not be my son. And if my son isn't available or responsive, who are the other people in my life? And it might be that it's both of y'all for each other for a while. But the goal is also, who are people that I trust that may not necessarily be my kin that would be able to take care of these types of things.
Yeah, it's good, too, that you have had those conversations, and you didn't ask for permission. You just said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this, 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 this. And again, like you said earlier, just writing things down and make sure they're in writing. We're here, then I'll get you. Yes.
One subject that didn't come up, I didn't want to interrupt you all, but it has to do with relationships between siblings, not the parent. It's really siblings. But I'll tell you the example, but without being real verbose. So my ex-wife and her husband, their home had to be sold for their health situation, and it just had to happen. And my daughter and her brother didn't work well together on it. They didn't. She kind of controls things. And as far as like communication, that's a good subject. You've mentioned it several times. She has a PhD in communications. So
Seriously, or
she does.
She really does. Okay.
She really has a PhD in communications, and the home in Austin had to be sold. And my son got the realtor, actually, that turned out to work with my daughter to sell the house. But she took over, took over everything. And it created brokenness between my daughter and my son. So it was really hard. So it's all over. the house was sold, and my ex-wife has Alzheimer's, and she was moved here, and my daughter was in charge of all that. And she lives here, and well, she has Alzheimer's. Her husband had to be moved to another place, and it's sad, but she's doing well. Yeah. It's all behind us, but the relationship between my daughter and her brother, it was real hurtful for a long time.
Sure. So what would be some ideas or recommendations when we have sort of that inner family sibling sort of tension?
Yeah, no, I think this is a great example. And I think that your experience and what you observed is really important to kind of acknowledge in this scenario that, hey, I saw what happened when, your mom's husband died. And I saw y'all's relationship really kind of dwindle and be in a really rough place. And I don't want that to happen when my time comes. So sitting them down at a table and going over your plan. That way, every party who is interested knows what you want and they've heard what you want. And then I think about children as assigning them roles, right? There are so many roles that need to be filled when you're talking about your end-of-life planning. Maybe one of your children is gonna be, the executor of your will, take care of the financial component. Maybe the other person is gonna handle the caregiving stuff. But it's all going to be directed by the captain, which is you. And your job is to let them know exactly what you want. That way, if and when that does happen, they're not like squandering and kind of fighting over the roles. No, Dad said that I'm going to be in charge of this, and you're in charge of this. So let's kind of stick in our own lanes and figure this out. And I think that also gives them a little ease of mind and less guilt in the situation as well, that, I'm going to do what my dad told us to do. We've talked about this. We have a plan. And, he didn't want that to happen again to us, right? Because the reality is that a lot of relationships really get torn apart after someone dies. And that's really hard. That's the last thing a parent wants to have seen.
I think it's an advantage that we're of sound mind, for our case, which is really great. Thank you.
I have recently been through a very traumatic move after losing my husband, and we were on the waiting list since 2019. The message came that there was a one-bedroom available, and we had never seen these places. We were I was moving from a two-bedroom. The message came on Friday, and the message came on Monday that she made a terrible mistake, the woman I've been dealing with since 2019. And so I never saw it until I signed the lease and got the keys. And it turns out there is no linen closet, no coat closet, no drawers in the bathroom. So I'm having a tough time. I'm surrounded with boxes, and I'm trying very hard to find a place to put things, and I know I need to go find new pieces of furniture and so on, but my son came at a very inconvenient time yesterday or the day before, about the time that I normally eat. He came to go to work and he ended up calling my brand new place that I'm trying so hard a pig pen. And I haven't responded to him to tell him how much that hurt. And I don't know quite how to go about letting him know that, I know he knows I'm trying, but there's just nowhere to put anything.
Yeah. I'm going to make an assumption. Sons are hard. I think men are hard in general because we often don't teach them the same emotional skills. And so I think that there's like this component of vulnerability that you're feeling, right? Like, you had to move abruptly. It isn't what you wanted. you wanted to try to make the best out of your situation, and it's a kind of cruddy situation, and you're trying, and it's moving, and you're meeting new people, and there's all these things that he's not really privy to, I'm assuming. And so I think that starting with that, like, this hasn't been easy for me. This has been really hard, and I'm trying to really make the best out of the situation. And when I hear you say this apartment is a pig pen, it makes it really hard to kind of, just sit with that. Like, this has been a really difficult time for me, because I think moving in general, especially when you're an older adult, is one of the biggest hurdles to kind of deal with. It is so hard to move and to uproot and kind of leave your community and start all over again. And I don't know if they'll have the space to hear that, but I think that that's, kind of going back to the technology. It sounds like he's busy and he's doing his own thing, and it was very quick-paced and it happened very fast. But if he has the time to take a moment, I mean, it could be a door for you to kind of share, like, how that was hurtful and how that you are really having a hard time adjusting. And, it's going to be a pig pen for a little while. But it's my pig pen, right? Like, it's my space, and it's, my home, and nobody wants their home to be called a pig pen. Yeah.
For people who simply do not have anyone at all to help or to have the conversations with, and like you say, you can't die alone, and sometimes dying itself takes a long time. Is there, at one stage, we were in that situation with some people we cared about a lot, and we were able in Houston to hire a master social worker, independent person who we paid monthly, depending on what was needed at the time, was absolutely incredible and was trusted by us. We were out of state. And is there a list of independent, certified people in this area that we felt very fortunate to find this person? And I didn't know if there was a list of people that were professionals.
Forgive me if I don't mention somebody else, but I've worked with Senior Services of Austin. They're right back there. Erica has a group, and that's exactly what they do.
What is?
Senior
She's
Services
waving right
of
over here.
Austin.
This is Erica.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much.
They're a team of social work. I think they're all social workers, and they all provide case management, and they're experts in this area and getting you the right resources.
And that you can pay for.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Erica would appreciate that if you paid for their services, yes. Anyone else? Oh, yes, ma'am.
This is a specific situation, and I don't know, it might apply to someone else, but my sister is living in South Carolina, near, like within 30 minutes of where her daughter lives. She's 86, and she has just been scammed for the second time, and she has admitted it to her daughter and to me. But after this second time, my husband is telling me that I need to call the daughter and say that she needs to take over Sharon's finances, or her, most of her money to protect her. And Sharon, my sister's mind is fine. It's just that she fell for the scam. And she regrets it, of course. And so I don't know. I'm kind of, number one, not knowing what they should do, but I don't even know if that's my business. I mean, my sister and I are close, but I don't know if I should be calling the daughter and talk to her about it or what.
Yeah, for my approach, and I even think that this would be similar for most providers, or I would hope to do that, is I always think about the least intrusive way to adjust this, right? Most intrusive way is, I'm going to take your credit card, I'm going to put your bank accounts in my name, and I'm going to handle everything. That is going to be a very hard adjustment, and your sister probably is not going to like it. And so, we start low. You know, maybe we put some kind of restrictions, but most importantly, let's get her some education. There's lots of scam resources. Scams are so good now. It is scary. It doesn't matter if you're an older adult or a young person. They are really, really good right now. Be careful of calls that you don't know. Like, I think that's one of the biggest things. You get calls all the time. They ask you to change your Medicare plans, Advantage plans. If they're asking you for any sensitive information, hang up. Nobody's going to be asking you for sensitive information and going to be trying to help you. Make sure that you verify your resources, right? You know, when I call somebody, I'm telling them who I am. I work for Family Eldercare. I'm a licensed social worker. I don't immediately think clients will trust me immediately when I first call. And so I build relationships with them. And so, you know, that consistency is helpful, but I think a lot of it is starting with education, maybe making sure that the daughter is aware and just having conversations on how can we avoid this in the future, right? What are some kind of mechanisms that we could put in place? If she was scammed by phone, maybe there's settings on your phone where you cannot allow people to call you if the number is unknown. If it's email, going through her email, blocking all unknown senders. So there's kind of like little mechanisms that we can do to increase safety related to that. But I think it's kind of just digging a little deeper. How can we support your sister and prevent this from happening again? And your husband is very kind to be worried about her. And I understand that, but I also, you know, if there's no reason to take away her financial independence, why would we do that?
Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, well, let's give it a word of, yes, round of applause for Nadia. Thank you. So glad you guys could be with us today. You have your feedback form, the bright yellowish form. Please fill that out. Leave it at the table for us. Also at the table here, right here, we've got a few invite cards. Grab one. Bring a friend next week. No, not next week, next month. And again, I appreciate y'all being here. The church had kind of a last-minute change for this month that we had to switch to the third Thursday, but back next month, we're the second Thursday through the November. So we'll ask the EPs to get back to their tables, and thank you guys for being here. Nadia will be at her table there in the center. Say hi to her, and I hope you guys have an amazing day. Okay, take care.